what was going on there and extracting really important intelligence items from such attacks. So it's all been good. It's all been very, very interesting. I don't know that I started this at 12 like you did, but I did start pretty early too. I was always very much a hands-on kind of guy. I actually started um, with digital circuitry and microprocessors. My first programming in the 8085. So I was machine level language programming, assembly level programming, and then just came up through different operating systems and platforms there. The other thing that I would do a lot of in the FBI was go out and do speeches, presentations, teach classes, because everybody's wanting to know a little something. Everybody is wanting to learn a little something. Everybody wants to pick the brain of, us geeks that see this stuff all day long. And much of what I saw and came to understand just is not written down anywhere, mostly because of the classified nature of it. However, I find that even today, like in my own small business that I'm running now, where I can go out and look in on stuff or have conversations with people, the things that I saw then that are classified that I could never talk about or write about, they sure impact my decisions in the way I see things now. Right? I mean, I have conversations sometimes where I'm making a recommendation and they're looking at me like, nobody talks like that. How do you know that? Well, and then I'm a little bit stuck because maybe I can explain a little bit about how I know that, but not exactly where, not exactly how. So I give you like maybe half the details. And a lot of these folks in the C-suite, I think that bugs them a little bit because, they're decision oriented. They want to know the facts. They want to know the figures so they can understand what it is they're deciding about. And I can give you the impact, and then working backwards from there, I can give you some of the details about how I know that, and the rest of it, it's like, it's like the old commercial, trust me. So that's me. That's what's been going on recently and what I've been up to. Somebody else's turn.
All right, Peter Gregory here. I've just finished just about 7 years at Optiv Security, being an executive advisor. Been inside of dozens of companies to see the state of their security programs, and man, it feels like a lifetime of security career work in just those 6.5 years. Seen really amazing, highly mature programs, and I've seen organizations that had nothing at all. I mean, Barracuda firewalls and ESET antivirus and nothing else. And I can't tell very good stories because of course we can't reveal those clients, but a lifetime of learning in those 7 years. And the big takeaway I've had is that in so many companies, the state of cybersecurity is so bad. Many organizations, maybe most, don't have people who know how to make business-aligned, risk-based decisions on what to do next. But instead they buy tools based on all the wrong reasons. And maybe I'll just stop there.
Well, they buy a tool for the right reasons. They buy a tool so they can put a tick in the box. Doesn't mean they know how to use the stupid thing, but at least it puts that tick in the box that they've got the tool.
Sure.
Useless, but...
Somebody told them they had to buy it, right? Somebody told them they had to buy it, right?
Exactly. Well, whatever it is, the audit, the assessment, the whatever it is, that little bit of paper that they are beholden to tells them to, hi everybody, apologies for being in late and gate crashing and all that good stuff.
Welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
I think I have to I have to agree with what Peter was just saying. I mean, would anybody be surprised if I said I never got the phone call that says, Mr. Sutton, 90 days, no problem on my network, just thought you should know. Never got that phone call. It was always their data was on fire and something that they just bought to fix it is not working. And there's sure something's going on that we probably want to come take a look at, right? That's the way it always was. It was never, everything's great, just thought you should know.
But from the law enforcement perspective, nobody calls you when things are going right? I mean, when I'm not doing this, I'm a firefighter and EMT, and nobody calls us when they need, some advice. It's you're calling on your worst day. So I mean, Sam, especially from the law enforcement perspective, I can only imagine the phone calls you got.
Yeah. I mean, did you ever get a phone call where they said, hey, it's just a backyard barbecue, bro. No worry.
I mean, I wish we would, right? But no, I mean, usually it was the very few and far between. Once or twice, I actually had this happen recently because I still do this. We got an email from the local school that said, hey, we want to do a walkthrough with you guys in the police department. Great, let's do that, because I'd much rather do that today. And similarly with information security, I'd much rather work with my organization or other organizations to understand and prepare for the inevitable to happen versus something happen and us have to figure out how to respond to it and get the IR process moving. It's an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? I'd love to see organizations shift to that mentality, but unfortunately it just doesn't happen today. Not for smaller, less mature organizations.
No, I think we still need we got a little bit of about your background, but I think we still need a proper intro from you and then Chris.
Sure. So Noah Jr., Director of Security for a SaaS solutions provider to the technology and hospitality space. I was in security consulting, red teaming, pen testing for 5-6 years, then moved into a large Fortune 1000, helping build a security architecture program there. Once I was kind of through doing some of that, it was time to take on a new challenge and work for a small startup. And now I'm in kind of a mid-sized startup to scale-up company, helping set some groundwork for them. So really excited to be here and talk with this group, because I love hearing from other people as to what they're seeing out there from a security perspective. And so, Jacob, thanks for getting this group together and for putting this together. This is fantastic.
Absolutely. So you're up, Chris, and it looks like your dog could probably eat my dog like a chicken nugget.
Yeah, pretty much. Can you guys see him well enough? Probably not. Come
Here he is.
That's not a dog.
Not a large dog, it's a small bear.
Yeah. Here we go. Thank you.
Oh my God.
Yeah, if you didn't work from home, you could ride him back and forth to work.
Pretty much, yeah. Saves on petrol. Although what do you eat in bloody food is good boy. Yeah,
Hilarious.
that's my buddy. That's my buddy. Daisy's upstairs prowling around somewhere. She's slightly smaller. He's about somewhere between about 175 and 200. We got to take him into the vets again at some point and just go through the normal checkups. Daisy's about 130, 135 or so.
Oh, the small one.
Yeah, exactly. Both rescues. He's about 2.5 years old. Not quite, almost 2.5, 2.25 or so. So yeah, he's pretty awesome. He's filling out a bit more, but he's grown like full height now. So
Your background, Chris, I heard you've done some security stuff here and there, maybe dabbled in a little bit.
yeah, a little bit, kind of stuff like that. Broken enough things on the planet, gotten yelled at by enough people on the planet. Actually, ironically enough, I was hanging out with the FBI earlier on today on InfraGard. I actually got a very nice message back for them, which is actually normal. More often than not, the freaking FBI turn up at the front door. I guess most of the time, at least, they announce the fact they're turning up. So I guess that's one thing.
No. Hang on a second. Last time you and I met, no front door was involved. It was Hugh. It was a HughSecCon, I think it was, last season. We had a really nice chat and got to know each other. And I did not threaten to kick open a door.
No, you guys are nice. I had another run-in with the local folks here in Denver. Not that long ago, long enough ago, but not that long ago, when they wanted to know some stuff. So it's always kind of fun dealing with them. Bless them. But, no, it's, I guess, I don't know, background's kind of varied, let's face it. Got in this realm, geez, almost 40 years ago now, which is kind of scary. ZX80, ZX81 days, for crying out loud. And then took a break, jumped into the military for an extended period of time, literally jumped in and out of airplanes for a long time. And then back into this industry. Been in the US about 20 years or so now. And, still causing chaos and mayhem in this industry. I tend to be the grumpy bastard that points out all of the stuff that people tend not to like hearing about. And I am the one that, if something isn't fixed, I typically am the one that will put a stake in the ground and say, we go no further backwards than this. So doing some fun stuff. The computer over my shoulder is messing around with the EEG sensors and basically building a Borg version of me. Doing a bunch of stuff with actual artificial intelligence, not the AI-like crap that we tend to sell in this industry. And a few other things. Yeah, all sorts of fun stuff. I tend to meddle in a lot of things, let's put it that way.
I like all the true false statements. This is our AI.
Oh, sure you say. Tell me about it. Yeah.
But hopefully your counterpart, your mechanical counterpart, will be allowed to fly.
Yeah, Jesse's good. Jesse's in good shape. He and I are actually going to catch up next couple of days. I got to head over to his place, move some stuff around with the skid loader, and then make some space for the RV that we just picked up this weekend. So
was Jesse the one you presented with at ThoughtCon? What was it, 2 about jacking?
Years ago.
God,
yeah, Jesse with the tractors. Yeah, so and he and I are still working together. So we resurrected Hillbilly Hit Squad years ago and just kept it going behind the scenes after all the Al debacle.
Yeah.
And we kept it going, and then after I left the TiVo, kicked it back into like a high gear again. And it's typically TI and a couple of others that are the core of the organization. Then we just bring people in and out for what we're using for. We've got thankfully a number of trusted folks, but yeah, just kind of building that back up at the moment, more the consulting, virtual CISOing, break fix and having some fun with various things, and just doing a fair amount. We've got some fun projects on the go, both legitimate and otherwise. We're having some fun doing some research back on farming and tractors again, because tractors haven't changed that much. So we went back into attacking tractors and the food industry. I got some fun things that I have no clue what to do with the disclosure yet on them. And then the flip side of that is we're in the middle of brewing moonshine. So we got the still basically in the back of the area. We got 20 odd gallons still going, and we're just messing around. We haven't blown ourselves up yet, which is actually a good thing. But we're just
now, I was from the government and I'm here to help. And if you need someone to audit your moonshine processing, I'm thinking I could help you out with that. Did you ever see the history program, Popcorn Sutton? Sutton's my last name. I'm sure there is some long drawn out relationship somewhere. So I'm just going to claim that as a little bit of background experience for that endeavor.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, we're just having fun with it. It's actually fun messing around. It's we're just doing sugar washes through it at the moment just to test and play.
Yeah.
It's like anything. It's like, okay, the brain is always over here. Switch gears for a minute and bring it over here for a bit. So we've got that going. Jesse, I think last time we were in ThoughtCon, he was in one house. He bought himself a place in Arvada that's got like half a dozen acres. So he's been doing a bunch of stuff on irrigation, and we've been having some fun with like Arduinos on the irrigation systems and everything else. So some good stuff, just, mixing and blending the two lives together.
On the moonshine, keep the GoPro going so that, the world will know what happened when
no.
Like, what's this wire do?
Yeah, no, we're going to ignore that one. Colorado, unfortunately, has got some fairly rigid ways and means about what you can and can't do with that stuff. So we're
okay. So Chris, hold on. Let me stop you. This is a recorded session, so let's.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm good. It's seriously, if they bust me for moonshine rather than hacking ships in the middle of the freaking Atlantic, then that would be the irony of all ironies. Let's be perfectly honest.
Okay, now, if you get a tractor old enough as a target to attack, the only way you can attack it is maybe with a sledgehammer.
Oh, so we've got Model A's and Model B's. Jesse's got Couple of A's, couple of B's. I have an Oliver, and he's also got a couple of farm walls, and we got some orange thing. I can't remember what the hell it is. Yeah, he collects. He's got a bunch of the hit and miss engines from turn of the century. That's his. He loves that stuff. So I mean, and the nice thing about working with Jesse is like he knows that stuff all the way through to the modern stuff. So when we were attacking the engines on the 777s and the 380s, he knew all the telemetrics architecture, all the systems on that one. When we went after Pratt & Whitney's, the military engines, he knew all the FADEC controller architectures, the pin-ins, the outs, I mean, just amazing to work with him on that one. And, you know, he works for RTD on the buses. I mean, just an amazing. And then we got Swede, who's, you know, about 100 pounds sopping wet, who knows anything about diesel to know the mankind. So we were messing around with trucks fairly recently and looking at all the electronics on the trucks. Everybody's focusing on cars. We've just kind of like, okay, that was fun. We played with those 10 years ago. So we've been going after the big trucking systems because they're starting to build like swarm mentality with the trucks as they look to actually make them more effective as they go down the road. So we're looking at all the LiDAR architecture and all the engine architecture they're using to start screwing around with those systems.
This is what I love about this. This group is so diverse. I wouldn't think we'd be talking about a hit and miss engine. Seriously, this is great.
I liked it better when he was talking about the moonshine.
Oh, that's fun.
So technical.
So much
That's
good
chemistry
stuff.
right there.
Yeah. And it's amazing. And again, so a lot of the videos and a lot of the folks that are obviously that are making, I mean, we've got nice copper still with the thumper and everything else. And I mean, the math involved in getting the right sizes and everything else is fun. But then you start going, okay, these buggers are doing it down at, you know, Tennessee and other areas where you're, you know, 1,000 or so elevation. We're at 5,500 foot elevation. So we're sitting there and it's kind of fun. It's like old world meets new world. You got the thumper and everything else. On the back, there's a bloody whiteboard where we're doing all the math on it to figure out, you know, temperature variations based off of altitude, density, and all the other stuff. Ton of fun.
Physics, I love it.
Oh, tell me about it. Total fun stuff. Actually, speaking of physics, I'm doing a project with some folks in DC-ish neck of the woods where we're actually, part of my background is quantum mechanics and mathematics. So I'm helping them build out a theoretical model for communication using quantum entanglement. They wanted to put a whole project out there about communicating up in space and some various other stuff. And so they'll look, what's the best, lightest way of doing it? So because of some of the stuff I do and some of the stuff I know, started talking about quantum entanglement and splitting atoms and particles and stuff like that. I'm like, holy shit, could you build something like that? And I'm like, theoretically? So yeah, total physics fun, just absolute riot with, you know, all of the quantum-based architecture physics, which is obviously, you know, you take the book and you just go, here we go, let's see what we can do. So much fun.
Yeah, so far, hit and miss engine, moonshine, and quantum physics. I zoned out when you start talking about quantum mechanics and physics. That's way above my level of that I want to get into.
Seriously.
I love the theory. Learning about the theory of it is brilliant. I love that part. But the actual math behind it,
Yeah.
I'm out.
The theory's amazing. I just love the theories because I come from like a theoretical mathematical background. So we were always the ones that most of the people hated because, you know, you're sitting there like, okay, well, it's literally how does shit work? I don't know, let's just figure it out. And you throw the general ideas and concepts out there until something feels like it sticks. You play it out as far as you can go and you go like, well, until science and math and everything catches up, this is about as good as we're going to get. And they used to hate us because, you know, you can always prove 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, but you can do it in so many different ways. It's fun. It's a ton of fun to do it with.
I'll tell you
See,
what.
my background wasn't on the theoretical. My background was more on the pragmatic, where we would take things that previously had not been connected off the shelf. We would take certain chipsets or certain engineering principles and we would start with a blank whiteboard and we would say, all right, we have these bits and pieces. We should be able to cobble something together to make our own little circuits and our own little nice black box with a cable hanging off of it.
Yeah.
And we jack that into what we're going to do and we write a little, assembly language program to make this thing come up and breathe. And it's all there. All we have to do is figure out how to integrate it, put it together, and tinker with it a bit. So I would say conceptually the same as what you're doing, but one step further behind, right? All the theories had been worked out, and then folks like me would come along and figure out, nice, now let's see if we can make all the marbles work together.
I love that. That's so much fun because it's so nice going, okay, I think I'm actually working on something at the moment with a good friend of mine. We took the concept that we'd messed around with many, many years ago, and then the .gov, the LEO world took over, which was the concept of being able to manage, control, access, and potentially utilize all of the signal areas, cellular systems, shall we say. So took a little bit of that and started messing around with it about 6 months ago. And it was because a friend of mine was going up to Sturgis. And again, with all the bullshit that's going on, with the fact that people don't listen until something happens, what I'm about 6/8 of the way through finishing off now at the moment is I built an architecture that starts off on like either Bluetooth, BLE, we'll go to RFID, we'll go to a wireless spectrum. I'm trying to get it to go to a cellular spectrum, but it frequency hops and infects at the same time. So as long as it can get a signal, and just one signal, it doesn't actually care what it is, it will actually run through a set of predetermined things. As long as it can get one signal, it will invoke, it will associate, will do everything it can to get on, and then infect back out on any signal spectrum it can. So it's basically as much of the spectrum spreader as it possibly can. And a lot of that's taking some of the off-the-shelf systems and then tweaking it for what I want it to, and then just honestly skinning out so much of the crap that's in most people's code these days. So I was going to try and give it to a friend to deploy it at Sturgis. So he was basically going to stand in the middle of Sturgis on his bike, turn this thing on, and just see how many machines he could actually infect with Bluetooth or wireless with all the people with the bikes. As yep, proved you. So didn't do it because I actually ran it around the lab and then took another weekend to actually clean the stupid thing back up again. So I've got no way of stopping it yet. I've got to figure that part out. I don't know. It's fun.
Stopping's the hard part, right?
Hmm?
Starting's the easy part, and stopping things are harder.
I messed with the agencies, years ago. We got fed up of the folks over on the African continent coming after us and attacking and all the scams and all the other shit and the denial of services that came over there. So literally 3 or 4 of us sat down over a very, very long week period with numerous bottles of whiskey and came up with this basically an infected, it's an altruistic, and it's deployed out in Africa at the moment. It's sitting on a botnet fairly extensively, and it just stops the computers from being reinfected. And all it's doing is it's infecting, it's fragmenting itself, dropping itself into BIOS memory and a bunch of other places, and then just recompiles itself using a randomizer a bunch of times on a regular basis, so nothing can find it from an AV standpoint. But all it does, it blocks certain file systems and various other things from being infected by other machines. That's all it does. It doesn't do anything else like that. It's kind of a fun little beastie. But when we first deployed it, we forgot to put any kind of geofencing in it. So this stupid thing bloody deployed. We dropped it in the middle of freaking Nigeria, and it just went poof. And all of a sudden got a phone call from a friend over in this country going, we've seen something. Is this yours? And I'm like, well, what makes you think that? He's like, because it's a pain in the ass. We don't know what the hell we're doing with it. I'm like, yeah, that might be us. So we end up geofencing the stupid thing. And now it's sitting on a fairly significant number of computers over there, because every now and again on a randomizer time it comes out to an IRC channel that a couple of us own that we just watch. But it means the computers don't get infected, so it's really all I care about.
It's working.
Yeah, it was kind of fun when whichever one it was, WannaCry or something came out. It was actually really kind of cool. Somebody put a whole map of the world up, and you could see all the regions that it hadn't affected. And you could actually, we end up doing a correlation, and somebody else did a correlation for us as well to cross-reference our data and said, yeah, you guys are, it's working. I'm like, great. We don't ask anybody's approval. It's just deployed. But obviously it's not coming over to this country for all sorts of legal reasons.
You mentioned the ability not being able to turn it off. It kind of takes me back in history a bit to when the first worm was released by Morse.
Yes.
And you know, theoretically, it was just a little experiment that just crawled along on its knees compared by today's standards, but yet the issue was the same. Great, it's launched, it's doing what he programmed, but he never thought about how do I turn it off?
It didn't have an off switch.
Yeah, right.
The problem is you can put a degrading cycle in there. And we ended up tying one of our degrading cycles up to atomic clocks, which is actually kind of a fun thing to do, because then it's irrespective of any device or system, so you're not pulling system time or any of that kind of crap out of it, plus you're also not advertising you're doing it. But the downside of that, especially with this latest one, the Spectrum Hopper, the downside is it's so quick to infect and so quick to move that by the time you've done it and you're like, okay, degrade here, it doesn't slow it down because the bug has already moved on. So all you're actually doing, I mean, you're almost spreading a bloom. So the bloom starts and goes like this. The core eventually stops actually infecting anything or doing anything, but by that time it's already taken over the stupid signals. So yeah, I haven't quite worked that one out yet. I don't know what to do. We'll figure it out. It's fun. I'm fortunate that this industry allows a level of this to actually happen. It's actually kind of nice.
Now, what type of frequency hopping is it doing? At what rate? Like, how many different frequencies is it on in 1 second?
It's deliberately randomized because what I don't want is somebody being able to do a full spectrum scan. It's something I realized when I built the other version, because otherwise you just look at some of their scans consistently.
Yeah.
So I've stepped it. So there'll be times it'll run up a spectrum, down a spectrum. I've actually broken the spectrum into RFID, BLE, 2.4, the 5 gigahertz stuff, and a couple of other spectrums, the 850 megahertz, because it's fun going off trains. The amount of freaking electronics on trains is hilarious these days, and they're all running on like 8.5 up to 2.2426 gig. So I've broken it down into blocks, and it takes each one of those blocks and either starts at the top and goes to the bottom, or vice versa. And then it has a frequency cycle randomizer 1 to 20, so like every 3 minutes, 3 minutes and 20 seconds, it'll go between different circuits, and it can go anywhere from like 0 to 3 minutes and 20 seconds. So you'll get a burst of activity, and then it can go dormant for a little bit, and then another burst of activity, and it just works its way through the spectrums.
So I'm willing to bet on your train systems that you were looking at, but you know, that's just a large industrial control system that meanders down the track. And while there may be some physical security on that big box as it lumbers along, and that's a may, I'll bet you there is zero type of security controls in that operational environment.
Well, no, I guarantee you there's security controls there. They've just been the same one since 1993.
So we talked, I was part of a team, AM Cyber. I was part of that team four-ish years ago, give or take a bit. Yeah, about 4 years ago. And we worked with some folks down in Florida, and we worked with NTSB and AAR, American Association of Railroads, whatever they are. AAR basically washed their hands of most of the issues because they're just there to broker the conversations. NTSB was aware of it, but I mean, we went through that stuff like a hot knife through butter. And honestly, the other big one isn't just the railroad itself; it's those nice little silver boxes that are dispersed all the way along the railroad. Yep. That a 5-pin chub lock and a network cable is all that stands between you and an Electrologix, which used to be a GE box that sits there with a user ID of GE and a password of GE or admin GE if you're lucky. And you're on the network. I mean, at that point, it's fair game. Yeah, I mean, it's, what's the risk? Good question. How often is it going to get abused? Probably not very often. Does it have the potential? Absolutely.
And what's the effort of trying to fix something like that upon hundreds of thousands of miles of track, right?
Yeah, I mean, you at that point in time, you assume breach and you mitigate accordingly. I mean, you're literally building you're building a defensive situation. So I'm assuming I've been breached. So let's put something, put my background deceptive stuff in there, or what alerting, what monitoring can I put in there? What can I learn about the infrastructure when any kind of anomaly would tell me that something is wrong with it? I mean,
it'd be good for like a zero trust framework then.
Yeah, but the problem is the only challenge on something like that is you have to very effectively understand your own environment, so you know what you can and can't actually let in or out. And locomotives, you might be able to get away with that. It'd actually be an interesting one, because at least that system is, for good or for bad, is relatively static, and arguably hasn't changed that much in the last 20 odd years, let's face it.
Sounds like SS7. As long as no one can get a hold of the wire, it's okay. But
yeah. Problem is to your point, it's too easy. I mean, when we were doing our testing, we would drive out of Denver up into the hills and hit a box up in the hills, open it, make sure we knew what we were doing. Down south from us is a place called Pueblo, where they've got a huge testing setup, fantastic testing setup for the locomotives. So a bunch of the folks were down there a number of times. And yeah, I mean, we went through, to AAR's credit, they recognized that there were all problems. But again, I think, it's worse than the airlines. I mean, nobody wants to do something until somebody gets hurt or dies or somebody gets burnt or something happens. I mean, you've seen that in the industry side of it. Everybody's like, oh yes, we probably should do something. But until they walk in and their screen is like, congratulations, you've been, ransomware, please pay, love, hugs, and kisses.
You ever driven down a road in the suburbs and you see a crosswalk and a blinking yellow light over it? Do you know why that light's there? Because somebody died there. Somebody died there. And then the light goes up.
Right. It
does. It takes a catastrophe to make those kinds of changes. But I would imagine, knowing nothing about those networks, that it's an ancient design with no field upgradability, hard-coded credentials, and you would have to rip it all out at once and put it all in again.
Yeah, I mean,
which will never happen.
No. So, you've got ways of overlaying on top of it. I think that's where it gets interesting.
Build another network around it, right?
Well, I was on a webinar earlier with Paul Ferrelio, one of the lawyers out in New York, awesome guy, and retired general. Again, another awesome individual. And we were talking about, the fun and games of 5G and, where that's going and what's, that's obviously an overlay on top of 4G. But how do you secure, or how do you deal with the data that moves across it? It's like, how do you encrypt it all? How do you move it all? And obviously all the inherent vulnerabilities. So some interesting conversations to have on that side of it. But again, it's humans, we ran into this with the airlines, and the question that was asked in the CEO's office of Airbus in out on the East Coast was, how many planes do you want me to crash before you will pay attention? And at that point I got myself banned from Toulouse and a bunch of other places.
Well, if it was Boeing, we know the answer is 2.
Yeah, no shit. And again, so that's the problem. How many people have to die before we pay attention? And that's the worst case scenario. You think where we are now. Samuel, from your point, from the federal authority standpoint, how long have you been how long have you been hanging out with the feds?
I was in for 28 years before I finally busted out.
So can you imagine, like, going in, first year inside the feds, you walk in there and the federal authorities are like, hey, we want to protect the American population, so we want to put a recording device so that we can gather information and we can help understand and we can do some proactive work behind the scenes. Let's look at Israel's doing the same bloody thing. They're watching the borders, they're understanding each one of the companies, and behind the scenes they're doing what they can to help protect the population. So 28 years ago, 27 years ago, the feds are like, hey, we should be able to do this. And the answer at that point in time would be, holy shit, there's no way America would ever want that. There's no way the average American is ever going to do that. Nobody's going to allow this to happen. Nobody's going to allow wiretapping. Now we queue up to bring wiretapping devices into our own homes. We wait in long lines for the stupid things. We
call them Alexa.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
Private company.
Money.
And we pay money for it.
Yeah.
instead
Yes.
instead of hiring a lawyer to stop it.
And so that's, the societal change is really, really interesting. How we as humans have adapted. Again, you look at these blasted things that we have. 10 or 11 years ago, if somebody had told me that not only is all my personal information on one of these things, but potentially all my passwords can be, it's listening to conversations if and when I want to do the damn thing. Oh, by the way, not only that, but every time I download an app, it takes my entire life and sends it to a server somewhere else, probably without me asking about it. And I accept that.
So this is one of the things I bring up when I go out and do presentations, especially with high school cybersecurity students or college cybersecurity students. One of the things I do is I say, all right, everybody who's got at least one mobile phone, hold it up, let's see it. And of course, we know that at least half of you in here have got more than one between your mobile phone and your tablet and whatever else you got going on. You're wired to the hilt. I said, now let's just talk about the phone. See that phone, all the things you can do on it, all your data that's on it. I want you guys to realize something. What I want you to realize that long before you were born, less computing power in a much bigger box was used to put men on the moon and bring them back than what you now hold in your hand today. And it's like blank stares, no comprehension. It's like they have no idea what I'm talking about and how much things have changed. And to me, that's astounding. And I think, as Chris was bringing up, I think it's a part of what speaks to this generation behind us. I mean, I'm sorry, I was kind of blabbing about it today. It's like, all right, somebody didn't read the instructions where it talks about the permissions. This app is going to take over your phone, all your data, all your accounts, right? We're talking about the tracking that the University of Michigan is going to sort of foist on all their students, the personal tracking so they can track their students around campus.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, somebody did not read that permissions page when they downloaded that app.
Right.
Or they don't understand. I think they don't understand the consequences, and they're overly trusting of the motivations of the people designing the systems, which might be noble, but those systems are also, attackable and abusable to other ends.
That's, you think about it, you go into a store or you're sitting in a restaurant, when you can these days, and you hand over your debit card or your credit card, somebody takes that and they wander off and you lose track of it for 30 seconds or a minute. What happens to it at that point in time? Then when that credit card's been swiped, all of those steps and stages that it goes through, and that at each one of those points in time, your credit card is vulnerable. And then you take that to the human and you go, okay, not only have I done the same thing in healthcare, but I'm doing that in my private life every single time I want to deal with one of these bloody things. And this and everything else. And it's just like, we are selling up. Yeah, what was that famous song? I'll have to look it up. It's like Rolling Stones or somebody. It was like selling England by the pound.
Genesis. Yeah.
It was Genesis. Oh, there we go. We're doing the same thing to ourselves. I mean, we're not selling, we are getting something for it. We're getting access to TikTok for it. But we're selling ourselves by the pound when you really think about it.
I have an engineering friend who keeps quipping. He says, you must remember, if it's free, you are the commodity.
You are the product being sold.
No free lunch.
Interestingly
How
enough,
do
you
people
guys,
forget that?
how does what, Jacob?
I was going to say, how do people forget there's no free lunch?
Here's how. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw, but recently there was a graphic designer that put together, I can't share my screen, unfortunately, that put together this terms of service infographic. If you just Google search for terms of service infographic, it's like the second or third image search result. But it shows, like, as a result of how long these damn things have gotten, 97% of people aged 18 to 34 say that we just click through and agree and I just don't care, right? I can't read it. It's too long. And it shows the actual length of each Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, Twitter, all of them kind of coupled to each other. And they're just incredibly huge. It would take 30, 40 minutes, an hour to read the entire thing. Nobody's ever going to do that.
They're
And-
almost as long as the register tape at CVS drugstore.
there you go.
There it is. And it's actually, yeah. Here,
I'll drop this in the chat here.
Oh, you are? Awesome. The Visual Capitalist one?
Yeah, I this was on digital information.
Oh, look at that. Look at all the pretty colors.
I mean, it's nuts to think how long those are, right? If you keep just scrolling through.
That's it.
Oh, my.
I want to see who the biggest offenders are.
Yeah, who's the winner down there?
That
let's see,
was-
Microsoft.
Wow.
MS, yeah.
Microsoft's terms of service is as pretty close to the same language as Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
15,000 words?
It's shorter than Art of War.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
Longer.
U.S. Bill of Rights, silly.
Now, there's just something disgusting about that. Code of Hammurabi, U.S. Constitution. Oh, man.
I just thought this was fantastic. Like, somebody actually took the time to think about this and put it together. You know, and we talk about how do we as an industry do better about telling our story. Like, find a UI UX person that can help you put that story together, because I never would have like remembered this. I literally saw this browsing through Twitter, and maybe it was a 5-minute read. I remembered it because of the colors and because of how it was designed and presented. And how do we do a better job of telling that and using that kind of concept to teach others? This was phenomenal, though, and it stuck with me. So.
And I think it's a good thing to think about, too, when you're designing your own security policy for your own people within your company, right? And it's one thing to have this crazy long, 80-page security policy, but if your users don't know it, then nothing's going to happen. And you know what? And I see it time and time again, is the users are not educated, but us as the information security professionals, we know better, and we blame the end user when in fact we did a poor job educating them.
And they blame us.
Well, yeah, everybody blames us, but we shouldn't be venting at the end user that we didn't properly train and expect them to comprehend our 60-page security policy.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in organizations before, both as a consultant and internally, where we had a policy book, and it was, unfortunately, best laid plans. Somebody went ahead and purchased a template, thinking it would apply to their organization, did the find and replace to say, insert company name here, and now I've got 158 pages of policy documents that you give to me day one as a new hire. Nobody's ever going to read it.
Oh, and by the way, finish that, sign that as soon as possible so we can get your account created.
You think that nobody reads the terms of service, but if you don't do the same conceptual modeling of how you want to approach this in your organization, nobody's ever going to follow your information security or privacy policies. So to your point, try to make them as human readable and understandable as possible. I know we have to satisfy both whatever security framework we're using or compliance framework we're under, but if you do have to have the 400-page document, at least give me the bullet points at the top, that's the TLDR. If I can't figure out what this is in a 10-second, 30-second read, I'm never going to read the whole document. But back to my earlier statement, the worst unfortunate situation that I found is when companies do the find and replace, either leaving the old company name or insert company name here, because they haven't really taken the time to understand what the policies mean, how they impact their organization, and what they're going to be used for to help protect the company over time. It's just that there's no value there, except for checking a box.
Right. So if leadership doesn't even understand the policy, how are they enforcing it, and how are they going to, project that onto all the other employees?
And what do you do each year if you have to attest and say that you must read and review the information security policy manual every year, right? You're going to give me 400 pages to read. If you can at least help empower your users, I only want to give them the 3 documents we updated, highlight all the updates and say, here's what's changed, any questions, right? Let's make this easier for people. Let's stop making this hard on ourselves.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned a key word there too, is empowerment. Because when we empower the end users, not only are they going to abide by the rules that we created, but they can also they are our front line.
Yeah.
So I mean, when our DLP, when our phishing programs don't catch it, they're the front line.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great point, right? Empowering our people. I I have seen policies and procedures developed in vacuums and then presented as gospel, right? This is what we do. But instead, what I found personally that works, it tends to seem to work better is if you're implementing a policy that affects another team, right? I'm going to implement an application security policy that says we must do static analysis of code before commit time. Work with your engineering and development teams to understand what it is you're trying to accomplish and why. Have them have input and insight into the policy. Heck, have them help write it or review it with you. Because if it doesn't actually apply or make sense, it's never going to be followed anyway. So again, empowerment, right? I hate to use the term use, but use the people around you to help like implement these practices. Don't just try to do it yourself or on an island, because if you do, security is never going to have the tie-in or buy-in with the other pieces of the organization that it needs to be successful.
Right. It's called collaboration, and you collaborate with them. You tell them, here is what we need to get done, and let them figure out the how. You know, engineers like to solve problems like that. You know, if the what is, we need to scan code for quality and security prior to release, tell them that with a little more detail and let them figure it out.
Yeah.
It's their system. They're going to know better anyway.
Well, another great point you just made there, you mentioned quality, right? How long have organizations, if we're specifically going down this path of like code scanning, for instance, how many organizations actually already have a QA team and are doing, you know, some kind of code quality or some kind of code standard coverage when it comes to static analysis? Probably been doing that a lot longer than been doing security. And so find those existing processes that you can tie into and use. Don't just come in with the heavy handed iron fist and say, we must do it this way. Learn the existing practices of your organization and how you might be able to leverage them to the advantage of you and your team to achieve security outcomes through existing methods. We don't need to reinvent the wheel every time, right? Let's leverage other teams' strengths to our advantage.
So one of my favorite opening lines when I finally get to the point where it's just me and the other IT folks in a room with a couple of 3 whiteboards is I open up with something along the lines of, all right, I'm the new guy here. You all know where the dead bodies are, right? And that's why they hired me. So I can spin my wheels for weeks and weeks and people will tell me, oh, you're getting close, you're getting closer. I can just ask you guys because you've been here longer than I have. You know where every single stinking dead body is. And you're probably annoyed that somebody hasn't addressed 1 or 2 of them that are getting really ripe about now. So just where are all the dead bodies?
Exactly. Talk to people. Facilitate the conversations. Go shadow somebody and understand and learn, right? Go spend a day in somebody else's shoes and see how they operate the system that you're supposed to secure or protect. Because God forbid, I learned so much when I was in healthcare, sitting in a call center where our folks were taking calls from patients, watching as they entered information in and the process they did, to understand what they were doing incredibly well from a security perspective, validating who they were, making sure they had the right person on the phone, and maybe some areas they could improve. But, again, seek to understand first before you start jumping in and trying to explain or tell somebody how to do their job, right? I mean, you'd hate for somebody to come tell you as a security professional, no, you're doing it wrong. Here's how you're going to have to do it going from now on. And it be something that you absolutely hate and you're going to work around every time. Because how much of that do we hear, right? People want to work around the security controls we put in place because it's inconvenient, it slows them down, it makes them less efficient.
Well, the other thing is as well, so there's a couple of things on that one. One, as an industry, we have for too many years gone charging towards technology to solve the problem.
Yep.
We ignored the people, we forgot about processes, and we figured that buying more shit would fix it. And then secondly, unfortunately, if you look at a lot of the policies, if you look at a lot of the compliance side of the world, so much of that is driven by the technology. Thou shalt have IDS, IPS, DLP, thou shalt have endpoint, thou shalt have all these other bits of technologies. And the only thing it says about users is, please every quarter or every year, sit them down for 30 minutes and tell them not to click shit and don't send shit. And that's it, and we expect that to work. So
A lot like PCI.
yeah. Exactly.
For example.
And that's it in a nutshell. And so it's like, okay, and this is, part of the reason I'm hanging out with the Wiser crew is for that exact reason. It's like, hey, let's go back and focus on the human. Let's take a look at what we can do with the human. It's why we're doing this kind of stuff. It's why all with Sandor and the crew are doing the K through 12 education side of the world. It's how do we bring this back to the human, and how do we get the human to understand, and you can maybe get some to be more responsible, but at least help them at least get them to ask one more question.
Yeah.
That's all I can ever get somebody to do. It's question. It's just ask one more question. When the director of the FBI is on the telephone to you at home telling you, if you don't do this, I'm going to send the squad around, maybe ask yourself, is really that going to happen? Probably not. Yeah. Because if the director of the FBI, if somebody came up to your door, knocked on the door and tried doing the same thing, you call them an idiot and tell them to sod off. So, and it's the same thing, I pull up to your doorstep, I've got an empty suitcase, but I need to borrow $500 from you so that I can get into the trunk of my car because I locked the keys in my car because I got $1 million in there and I'm going to give it to you. Get the fuck, I'm going to shoot you. I'm sorry, you're going to get winged. But we fall for it online all the time. It's back to the human.
I mean, that's, having done the social engineering piece in my past, Chris, much like you said, I can't tell you how many times, I would give a story that if, even in person, right? We did in-person social engineering from a red team perspective as well. But so many people are so willing to do things over the phone or via email.
Yeah.
Thankfully, in my case, it was years ago, and I think we've gotten a little better, but honestly, right, that hair on the back of your neck stands up, or the spidey sense starts tingling that says something doesn't feel right here. We have to empower people to feel like they can ask that one more question, or they can be willing to hang up the phone or delete the email. If the CEO is really sending you that message about buying gift cards, do you think he really would be doing it in that manner, or in the way that there's spelling mistakes or a wrong name or from a Gmail account? Like, is that really what's happening? And if they just were to ask that one more question instead of replying and saying, oh yeah, sure, tell me what you need, we'd be much better off. So yeah, anything we can do, I've seen some of the work recently you've been doing with Wiser, and some of the stuff on LinkedIn and social media you've been sharing. I think it's fantastic. Anything we can do from a security awareness standpoint to get people just that little bit more educated is going to be paying dividends in the future, because they'll tell their friends, right? And they'll educate on how, hey, I didn't fall victim to this.
Right.
So
it's Ryan Cloutier. He's part of the security shit show that we do on Thursdays. He's coined the phrase, and I keep using it because it's so freaking relevant. We're analog humans in a digital world, and we haven't figured out how to rationalize. With the 5 of us here on screen, if I start telling weird tall stories, you're going to call bullshit on me. Because even though we're not face-to-face, there's still an interaction. There's still, it's as good as we're going to get for now. It's still an interaction. Whereas I do the same thing over an email, exactly to your point. And yeah, even in face-to-face. But even in email, we don't call bullshit that often. Or not as often as we should do.
We trust technology too much. I mean, the old phrase of, well, it must be true, I read it online.
So I go out and I do, presentations at security conferences and whatnot. And I have this great little cartoon I put up. I can't remember, I got it from the New Yorker or Atlantic Monthly or something. And it's almost as old as I am. Nice black and white sketch. And it's 2 dogs. And one of them is sitting in the executive's chair at the keyboard and the screen with his glasses on. And the other dog that looks a little bit younger is like looking over his shoulder, watching what he's doing on the computer. And the older dog says to him, because out on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog.
Yep.
Right?
Yes. Classic.
It's so true. It's a classic. And everybody who has an old person they're dealing with in the audience always ask for a copy of that, because they want to take that home, show it to grandma and say, look, Granny, here's why you have to be careful with what you're doing, because it's on the internet. You really don't know who it is, Grandma. So, don't give up your information. Don't fall into the storyline. Just like you guys are saying.
I have
But showing them the comic doesn't really help because the abstraction is something that they're lost on often.
Yes, but it starts the conversation. You get them over the giggle, you break the ice, and then
you guys read
I
that.
say
Oh,
something
is that
like,
backwards?
okay,
No, you're good.
Is that
but
back? Is it backwards?
It's good.
You're
No,
good.
it's the right way.
So that's
that's
one,
excellent. That's another great example right there.
and that's the other
I
one.
read
So
it.
this is, you'll recognize the dog on this one.
Oh yeah.
That's fantastic.
Trust but verify.
I have, I got a whole bunch of these made up. I was giving them out. And actually, so I almost want to argue now, it should be verify, then trust, and probably re-verify again in that continuous cycle. I want to be nice and try to trust people, but man, more often than not now, I don't. It's like, I'm going to verify who the hell you are. Then we'll have that conversation about trust.
Excellent. Excellent examples. And I use them to kind of get people over that initial hurdle, and everybody always says, oh, not me, but I'm taking care of grandma's machine, or I've got an older gentleman down the street or an uncle who's just not getting this stuff. It's like, well, okay, you need to be having conversation with them, and you can use examples like this to help them kind of picture. I don't know that they're ever going to get it totally.
No.
Oh no! I mean, I had an
Not before you
experience.
die.
I had an experience a few months ago. So I am my mother's IT, right? I mean, we all are.
Yeah.
And I gave her a Chromebook, okay, because it's easier to use and maintain and secure. And I was at her house, and the phone rang, and she has an answering machine, the kind of the little tape in it, and see, she never picks up the phone because of telemarketers. So the phone rings, and then it's this guy who says, hi, this is so-and-so from tech support at Microsoft. We've found malware on your computer. And my mom looks at me. She goes, should I pick that up? And I said, Mom, your computer is not Microsoft. And she looked at me like, really? I mean, there's so many things that are obvious to us that are just lost on the people who don't work in technology every day.
Yeah. My wife says I've forgotten more than she will ever come to know.
You ever knew? Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, I think it goes back to, I think now, like Chris, you mentioned, a lot of the technology now, that's not the solution, but I think there is a lot of great technology, properly deployed, IDS, firewall, endpoint protection, all of that. And I think these end users, I mean, I don't like calling them the weakest link, but I like calling them, our front line. So, these are the same users, that we talk about, our parents, they may not have that much knowledge. Even, the computer I talked about formatting when I was 12 years old. My father, who used that computer back in 1995, you'd think he's fairly tech savvy, but he got almost conned the same way, Peter, that your family did. Somebody called him from Microsoft, and later on in the day he called me and asked me about it. I'm like, Dad, are you kidding me? Like, you of all people should know better. You've been doing this for a while now. But
yeah, Dad. Yeah.
But if you don't use it, you lose it. And I think these end users and just the human factor, like you mentioned, Chris, that's what we need to focus on now.
I mean, we'll never, to the point, it's not a cure, but it's definitely, we need to educate more effectively. And you're right, there is a place for some of the tools. But again, the caveat I have with that is, even as our own industry, we've eaten so much of our own dog food, and our industry is now led by marketing.
Oh, yeah.
Than it's led by technology. And we're not led by innovation and by technology anymore. We're led by marketing. So, you've got several thousand companies in this industry, half of which are run by, vulture capitalists who are like, hey, we want to make some money, we'll spin up another deception company, or we'll spin up another whatever, and we'll bring the right people in, make money, do some good stuff, sell it to Intel or IBM or, you know, Palo Alto, whoever. My frustration there is they're not in it to protect. Our job at the end of the day, same with the FBI, our job at the end of the day, we have one fucking thing to do. That's it, one job. And that's to protect. End of discussion. We don't exist for any other reason than to protect others.
Yep.
But we don't focus on that. You know, we spend so much of our time trying to make money, trying to build up billion-dollar companies, trying to appease equity holders and investors and everybody else under the sun. If all 5 of us were antivirus companies, my antivirus is great this year because, you know, yours smells this year because it can't get the latest APT. Samuel's was great last year, but, you know, he's lagging behind because I've stole half of his engineers, you know, and Pete's is probably going to be great next year because he's just finally figured some shit out that nobody else has. And, you know, Noah and I are going battle to battle on a public forum because we're both killing each other, you know, big, dumb, and smelly. And that doesn't do the industry any fucking good at all because the consumer's going to look at us and go, the fuck do I do?
None of you are good at
They
either.
buy the product with the best story or the cheapest one, not the one that does what they think they want.
Right.
Yeah, marketing.
I mean, to your point, you know, Chris, punching ourselves repeatedly doesn't get us anywhere. It only makes us look, you know, multiple black eyes when it comes to the general public and what we're trying to sell. You know, and I've seen the infighting between vendors. I've received, not to name any of them, but I've received the emails where you pretty much, if you wanted to file a slander or libel lawsuit, you could do it based on the one email that you got about how X competitor's product that secures Y workload doesn't do X, Y, and Z. And so, you know, guys, at the end of the day, we all are in this for the same common goal of protecting ourselves, our companies, and our people. At the end of the day, the humans that run all of those things. Let's stop fighting with each other about it. Let's start figuring out how we do it better. And you know what? If one of your engineers goes to another organization because they found a better opportunity, frankly, we've probably done something wrong to not retain that person. But let's stop fighting with each other and stop finding ways of making this look like everybody's in it for themselves. We have to keep in mind there's a greater good of protecting our end users and our humans here, that if we don't do this, we all end up failing.
That's right.
And that scares me at the end of the day because so many vendors are willing to cut each other down or, you know, have candidly negative conversations in public forums, social media, what have you. And I think it's just unfortunate that we've come to this. And a lot of other industries have learned this already, and we're still growing up as an industry, and eventually we'll grow up and learn it, but we still have a ways to go.
A lot of companies misunderstand the fact that the competitors are not the adversaries. The cyber criminal organizations are the adversaries. And instead they're fighting each other, and the cyber criminal organizations are just coming in and cleaning up.
So would anybody be surprised if I were to mention that in the federal government workplace, politics just runs rampant between the individuals employed there? Would that be shocking? Would that be shocking? So what was flabbergasting was me, with my thinking and approach, I refused to play politics because I didn't have the time for it. And I had learned long ago that if I take care of the technology will take care of the issues for the people and eliminate some of the political trash that some of these people try to build their little fiefdoms on. And I later learned, going further with that I was working with somebody who was also as insightful. If they got around to asking me something about, hey, why don't you play the politics like anybody else? And that for me was the indicator, all right, now I got somebody I can work with who's also thinking about this, about protecting the data, taking care of the technology, never mind the politics. Let's just try to focus on getting the next priority project done so we can move on to the next one.
Like, I guess I look at that and I say, because I've also seen this, right? From a politics perspective, why do we have politics within cybersecurity, within organizations, right? We just talked about infighting. We just talked about the government. my mind, right? You mentioned building their kingdom, right? I have a role to play. My role to play is I'm a director of engineering, or I'm a director of product, or I'm a director of marketing. I have a role that I'm defined in that's somewhat boxed, right? And if people don't see the value of what you're trying to accomplish, there's protectionism, right? They're going to keep trying to protect what they've built. And so I've found many times, people will engage in politics only because they simply just don't understand or feel like they're trying to protect what they've built or their team or what have you. And so to get around that, I keep beating this drum of education. It's helping educate people on the what's and the whys and the hows, and partnering with people instead of playing politics, right? How does my team, I kind of mentioned it before, leverage stuff you're already doing to improve cybersecurity initiatives, or like communicate better with my board, right? If I'm going to go to marketing and have a conversation and want to ask for some of their time, how do I help them and how do they help me? It's not jockeying for position or trying to have somebody look better in one way or another. It's how do we partner? And I think so many times it gets lost on people, just like in the industry, we're talking about infighting. It's people play politics because they don't have a better option. And if we can present them with a way to better partner or better work with others, that achieves so much more than if we just kind of do this and butt heads all the time. Like, we get so much more accomplished. I know it's a generalization and it's really hard. I can say that all day long. Making it actually actionable and happen is the harder part. But the politics just drives me crazy sometimes.
But you got to remember too, you're at a smaller company now where it's a lot easier. Your roles are more defined and segregated. I mean, when you talk about Fortune 500 and larger, that's where you start getting that headbutting, and the roles are not quite as defined. So that's where you have that territorial issue, and then it never ends.
To be frank, I've personally witnessed and seen it and had to work through it in multiple organizations. Whether it's a Fortune 1000 all the way down to a very small company, everybody struggles with it. It's not, it doesn't go away just because you're in a larger or a smaller company. Right? It's all still there.
It's getting better though. I mean, in some areas, and the reason I've got some hope. You look at what like Alan Kimmel, Mark Miller, and like a bunch of the other folks have done for DevSecOps. You want to talk about getting three disparate areas of our industry together to go, hey, you're all meant to be focusing on the same shit. You're all meant to be basically rowing in the same direction. Developers talk to security, talk to operations. The three of you get in room and figure this shit out together. And it's amazing and actually really encouraging to see how far that's come over the last. This year is going to be the 5th year of the 24-hour DevSecOps. I love the fact that there are definitely, and there's a lot of Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies that are like looking at this going, hey, we can actually get the teams to collaborate, cooperate, and communicate under a common banner. I mean, it's great. A long way to go, but there's definitely progress in that, which is actually really nice to see. I am probably going to have to bug in a minute because my hound is reminding me that it is get out of there. My hound is reminding me that it is food time. It's coming up to their dinner time, and if I don't feed them soon, they will start eating the furniture.
Yeah, Chris, you're good. That's what I love about this being so informal. And if we have these, every 2 to 4 weeks in the future, there's no commitments from anybody. However, the 4 of you are always welcome to be on here. And, again, I just love it being informal. It's not a lot of work. You don't have to, you look forward to it. Yeah, you show up. Hey, if you're 10 minutes late, you're 10 minutes late. You got to drop. So no worries, Chris. Thanks for being on, and you do what you got to do.
Fantastic to see everybody. Great conversations. Thank you. And I'll catch up with folks later on. Take care. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
Cheers.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah, the politics thing is interesting. There's a former president who was quoted as saying, I don't think you made this up, but says it's amazing what you can get done if nobody cares who gets the credit. And ultimately that's a lot about what politics is about, is people trying to be the famous one or the smart one, or the one that saves the business. And that's like in the game of basketball where one player is playing a solo game instead of playing a team game. And cybersecurity is a team sport, and it takes collaboration and selflessness to help your organization win. You're not going to do it if you're trying to do it for your glory.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I also think that a member of that team has nothing to do with being a technologist. I think members of that team are the leaders of business units that sit on critical business information, because that's why they come to work, right? They don't understand about twiddling bits and changing out the stack of this and the equipment of that. They don't care. That's not why they get up. That's not why they're good at their job. But they happen to be sitting on and massaging and extracting and injecting critical data necessary for that business to keep moving. That person is a member of that team on projects I walk in on. If they're not, it's like, well, where are they? Let's identify them. They need to be in on these meetings. They need to be scribbling on this whiteboard with the rest of us. They need to be asking us some really hard questions. And we need to be asking them some things that perhaps they hadn't thought of. That is a team member.
Indeed. I mean, in the GRC business, they call that a data owner who needs to be making business decisions about who should be accessing it and why, and should they still have access to that a year later, and how is it being used, and do you approve of these new uses of this data, especially since our privacy policy says this, which is in conflict with what you want to do. And a lot of organizations, they kick that back to IT, and IT becomes the proxy for the business without understanding the business.
That's a really, I think, a topic we could probably delve a lot deeper into another time. Is just we've talked about partnerships and business acumen and risk here. I think there's such a significant portion of information or cybersecurity that, again, I kind of harped on partnerships right throughout this, but we tend to sometimes focus on the technical aspects of our jobs and what's the next tool we have to implement, or what is our regulator or compliance checklist, or third-party risk solution, or say we have to do. And there's a whole level of business side of cybersecurity. I'm looking at things from like the BC and DR lens to how do we as cybersecurity support our business, and in turn, how do we also understand and really get a better handle on what we do as an organization? How does the business actually make money, and what things based on that revenue stream do we actually need to protect versus I'm here to implement tools, right? And so just something that might be fun for another conversation for another day or time would be focusing on the business side of security, and how do we better work within our own organizations to handle cybersecurity from the business perspective. Because to Samuel's point, nobody cares about the twiddling or flipping bits, right? And the more technical side of it. There's a whole host of other things out there that there's a lot of area we could cover and ground we could cover when it comes to the business aspects of cybersecurity.
Yes.
Well, maybe that's a topic we jump in on, next go around is, where's the data, who owns it, how are they as much as a part of the team as the guys out in the server room?
Yeah. The only thing they're going to be worried about is how does this hinder me, or how does this help me? And there's no in between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's just like with marketing, you have to have a good story. I mean, it should be the truth, but it has to be a good story about why this security thing makes the business better. And so many security people fail because they don't understand that they're in sales.
Right. And I think to Noah's point too is I think you really need to maybe understand the business process too to help cater your security to it, because if you don't really understand what they're doing, I think that makes it difficult. I think that's where we become, are you hindering me or are you helping me? And there's no in between. Whereas if we understand their process and realize the key components that we really can't mess with their process, otherwise they can't even accomplish what they're doing. Sorry, my dog's losing her mind. that's when we become the bad guys. So
Yeah, and I think the other the good part or the benefit is you start to, like we were talking about this in the context of data ownership, right? And how do you figure out who needs to protect what? But more broadly, as you start to look at your business and how money is generated, revenue is generated, you really also get the benefit of being able to speak the language of your business and the partners that you have within the organization. When you start escalating that to conversations at the C-level or your board, again, nobody cares. I take that back. People care that you've implemented a new technology or a tool. It's going to be the so what, right? What's the impact? Why do I care about that? What is it going to do to protect us at the end of the day? And if you can tie it to any of the business objectives, so much the better. I think just too many times, again, we focus on the technical. So it'll be really interested to see, be fun to have a broad discussion on different business aspects of security, right? And how do security professionals help tell that story? And also, mentor. I think there's a whole nother concept here of mentoring those around us to better focus on the business objectives and outcomes, because we're only one group, we're only one person, as in my case, the director of security and others, in different roles. We also have a duty to help educate those around us and teach what we're trying to accomplish. So I think it'd be fun. I'd love to touch on that some other time and learn from you guys, because that's just someplace that I've just really started exploring on my own kind of side of things, is both at a previous organization and now where I'm at, really trying to drive it more as a business-based conversation. So I'd love to hear more about how others are taking on that challenge.
I think it would be great if we actually found ourselves in a conversation once in a while where the answer was, because I'm here to save your data bacon. I'm not trying to change anything. I'm not trying to, move anything around. If I do it right, you don't even know I did anything until the day happens your data crashes. And I'm here to save your data bacon suddenly materializes and you go, oh, that's why you did that 6 months ago. Exactly.
Yeah.
Except that's not how it pans out, let's be honest. Somebody steals the data bacon and then they look at you and say, why didn't you do anything?
That's a whole nother part of the conversation we can get into.
Yeah, another day, another time. But before we end, I wanted to get, one topic out there, is I just wanted to touch base on seeing if any of you folks had experienced anything security related, InfoSec related, based off of the shift to the work at home. I know, Noah, you were always kind of work at home, but from your organization, I know you may have some impact. Samuel, I'm not sure if you might be able to relate that to your previous work with the FBI on how that would have impacted them. And Peter, I'm not sure, we won't discuss your role, but whatever you think of that that may have impacted, the security around you. So I guess I'll start with Noah.
Yeah, I think we're fortunate that our company was already fully remote and has been since the founding. We're in travel, so one of the things we did is we wanted to empower our employees to be able to travel. So we are fully remote, work from anywhere. I have had conversations with other security professionals in my network who, really were trying to pivot very quickly to the work from home or work remote model. And unfortunately, like many things, the emergency situation in the business dictates how fast and how thorough of a security vetting and review we can do. I heard some organizations that went ahead and just said, we can't procure and issue laptops that fast, so just go ahead and use your own device for the time being, right? Or we're going to go ahead and, we won't allow you access to the network, but you can access, Office 365 and do your work there. But then that limits my productivity. And so, there's a whole host of things that I think went into those decisions that really, I would say, have been an interesting shift in how we do work. The other thing I would say is there's been a significant amount of vendors that have taken a great opportunity in this case to share how their tool or their product or their solution is going to solve all of my work from home problems. And if anybody has a silver bullet out there, I'd love to hear about it. But Generally speaking, I think, this pandemic has caused a lot of organizations to really push, if I tie it back to something, a VC and DR plan, right? How many places went and built their pandemic plan based on H1N1 a long time ago, never dusted it off, never tested it, and now guess what? We're using them, right? What is this? It's another pandemic. So very sorry, a little bit of rambling answer there, but all that to say, we have quite an interesting shift on our hands of many people working remotely and working from places that we can't necessarily secure or know how to secure. So it's just an interesting paradigm shift.
Yeah, sounds like you got kind of lucky since you guys were already there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know what you mean about some companies really having to pull all the stops out, because it was to the point to where no security at all, or we're shutting the doors. So what do you pick at that point? Because either way, it's going to be bad. But I don't know, Samuel, if you have any input on what you think?
Yeah, I can pitch a thought or two into that conversation. As you, I'm sure, are aware, in a highly classified government situation, very small percentage of that is done from home.
What, you're talking, I can't have a skiff in my house?
Well, you could, but that's part of the reason why it's a very small percentage, right? Now, the other thing would be in the true, I guess, change in criminal element that I've been noticing, big uptick in the whole, we called it business email compromise. Some folks call it CEO compromise, where somebody is spoofing, hey, I'm the chief financial officer and we need this voucher paid off lickety split, or this needs to be drop shipped tomorrow to this address. I mean, any of that kind of spoofing a C-level position to get something to drain a resource out of the company, right? Seeing much more of that coming up, because guess what? More people are at home. They're away maybe from that constant being reminded of paying attention to those things, because that sort of reminder is not being pushed out into everybody's home. We've been out long enough now that maybe that guard has come down a little bit. And since more folks are at home, to include more of the C-suite folks are at home, I think I'm seeing a trend where more of the scammers are just following. They're like flies following the cows in the field, all right? The cows are going to go where the cows need to go, and the flies are going to follow, and that's exactly what's going on. It's a bit of a gross analogy, but everybody gets the point, right? So everybody's at home that controls or talks to or speaks into money movement. So the criminals are now sending much more into the homes. And it looks to me, I can't give you a percentage, but it does look to me like the effectiveness is at least on the rise a bit. Part of that, I think, is because as everybody brought their laptops out of the office environment and set it at home, there's a disconnect from some of the protection mechanisms those laptops would have been plugged into in the corporate network world.
Yep.
Well, all those protections are not necessarily in place in everybody's little home office. So I think it opens up more vulnerability, more susceptibility, along with the more shotgun targeting being aimed right at him. And so this is why I think I'm seeing this go up.
Sounds good. What about you, Peter? Have you seen anything different in your industry?
Well, having been in a security company, I can say without naming names that security is not job one in any company, not even a security company. Companies had to do what companies had to do to keep their business limping along. They had to make sacrifices. The companies with better security leaders were at least letting their executives know what additional risks they were undertaking while they were undertaking them. Many companies were able to pivot very quickly to cloud and agent-based security protection, like IDS, IPS, web content filtering, CASB, yada yada yada. But you can't do those in a weekend. Takes a lot of planning to make that kind of a pivot in your network or endpoint-based protection system. So a lot of companies had to sacrifice security to keep the business running, and that is to the peril of some of those companies, as we know. So that's how I've seen that play out. The harder part is that many companies already had a work from home culture, so they took it in stride. But many organizations were very office culture centric, and they struggled a lot. And it was kind of humorous watching some of them try to do video conferencing for the first time. We're good at it because we do it all the time, but man, it's really something watching, people not being aware of what they're doing and what that portrays.
Peter, that we had the dad that was being interviewed on BBC, and the kid runs in from behind him, and
that's epic.
Like, could you imagine if that happened today? Nobody would even care. It happens on a daily basis, but yet a year ago,
every day.
That action happening was, oh God, it was hilarious, but it was also just a nightmarish scenario for somebody that's being interviewed on widespread world news. Today, it's my son just ran in here and said hi. Wanted to say hey to the people that Daddy was speaking to.
And to me, that is one upside of the pandemic, because now we are all in our homes instead of in our sterile office environments, and we get these visual and audio cues that all these people we work with are humans with families and pets and kids and spouses and homes and backyards with things in them. We are, for the first time, seeing a lot more of the human side of the people we work with instead of just the sterile office environment. So there's kind of a blending of personas. You can be one person at work and another person at home, but when you're at home and your family members are swirling around you while you're on your calls, you kind of can't, the air gap is gone.
Yeah, I thought it was, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. No.
As I say, I thought it was interesting. We had a new team member join us, and he was also from a fully remote company. And one of the things that they actually had was a rule. Again, this was before the pandemic, but if you were sharing a space with a spouse, a significant other, a friend at a coffee shop, whatever it may have been, they actually asked that if for the first 3 minutes or 5 minutes of whatever meeting you were at, just have that person say hi. And because it does give that little bit of a human connection. And I think, again, I have been in a fully remote organization for over a year now, and you don't get that perspective. You don't feel the conversation or the dialogue or discussion you would have about somebody's personal life in a lot of cases, right? Because you're focused on work. Nowadays, everybody's seeing it. And so the one thing I would say there, just a valuable lesson for me was, find opportunities to understand people at a deeper level, at a more personal level. Ask questions about their interests and their family and their friends, not to be creepy by any means, and not to try to steal their answers for their password reset questions, but really just to deeper understand them. Yeah, I know, the social engineer in me had to throw that in there. I'm sorry.
That's excellent.
But in all seriousness, especially in a remote organization where this is my setup on a daily basis, and you don't normally see people walking by or what have you, invite somebody in, have that conversation, have a quick, who's there with you, or what are you working on today on a personal perspective and projects, because we're all human. We all have other things we do outside of work, and if we don't get to know people outside of just what their role is in a company, we really haven't got to know them at a deeper level. And so I would push that to people, just to say, get to know those around you. Spend a little bit of time making that human connection, because you also may find that you have a common shared interest that may, in the end and in the end all be all, help you in the long run by making a quick connection that you can leverage in the future if you have a need you're trying to fulfill from a business perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a great point, Noah. I'm definitely gonna implement that in some of my calls, and yeah, that's great. And I'm glad we're talking more about the human factor too, because there's one thing I wanted to point out that hasn't been brought up yet is, yeah, there's the hardware, there's the technology, there's all of this, all of these hurdles into moving quickly. It's not just moving from, in office to remote. It's quickly like, hey, right now we have 10,000 employees in the office. They're going to be at home in 2 to 3 weeks. What can we do technology-wise for security? And all we think is about technology and the tools and DLP and IDS and all that. But the human factor is the most interesting part to me, because you might have somebody that may have been in the office and they were a wonderful worker and never, did anything bad. But it may have been that environment, right? Because they're inside this office, surrounded by peers, surrounded by their bosses, maybe even the leadership. And now they're at home, even though they may have the same tools, same laptop, same IDS, same DLP, same controls. But now, they feel they feel some freedom. And they're like, well, maybe, oh, I see this finance folder. Well, they don't work in finance and they shouldn't be looking in that folder. But now they may, feel, a little less restricted, and they may go venture off into that. I think there's a couple of things that come out of that. Is one, now you found somebody that, that may have done something malicious that you wouldn't have found out with them working in the office. And two, that now you're having to deal with an employee that maybe not have really done anything malicious, but because of the setting they were in, they felt like they were okay.
No one is going to walk by and catch them doing it.
Just to actually plug something Chris Roberts said earlier, I know he's not here, but he's been partnering with Wiser, which is a security awareness training company, and there's other competitors out there. There's KnowBe4, there's Culture Anime, a few others. If you haven't looked at what some of those organizations are offering today for free for teaching employees how to work more safely from home, I think ISC Squared, also the group that does the certifying body for like the CISSP, most of those organizations have released free content that you can use and repurpose and share with your either networks or internally at your organization. If you haven't done something like that, I would strongly suggest looking into it. Having people have to take a quick 10, 5, 2-minute working from home, securely working from home would be really useful, because we can institute all the tools and the controls in the world. But, my son or somebody coming in playing a game on my work laptop or downloading a new application on it and infecting it, could be a portion of the new normal from working from home. So, if you haven't, I just suggest looking into whichever solution or vendor or group that's offering those tools and use them to your advantage to share tips on how to be better secure while working from home.
Now we're good. Our user signed a 400-page user agreement that they didn't read, so we're good.
Yeah, so let me throw out one bonus for, not meeting in the office so much on a day-to-day basis. It causes an obvious drop in the plane of office politics. Come on now. Oh. Who else didn't see that coming?
How about that?
I count that as bonus.
There you go. Different backgrounds and experiences in here, so happy to share anything I can and try to get more engagement. This was great, guys. I loved it. I really appreciated the dialogue and the conversation today. I got to put a little one to bed, so this is my human aspect of me saying I got to call it a night, but I really appreciated it, and thanks for the great discussion. We'll hopefully talk again soon.
Yep, you bet.
Thanks, Noah. Yeah, we're wrapping up, take care. We'll talk soon.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye. So I think we'll go ahead and call it. I think it was pretty successful. I had a lot of fun. I think the very informal framework, it worked pretty good. We didn't have a whole lot of talking over one another and interruptions and all that. So it went a lot better than I thought it would, not having to mediate, and I really didn't want us to have that type of interaction, right? This is supposed to be like happy hour, right? You don't have a mediator at your happy hour meeting, right? So,
not a news channel
On the
fighting, right?
For themselves a happy something.
yeah. So I think it was pretty successful, and like I said, we'll share the recordings with everybody, and we'll try to get something on the books in the next 2 to 4 weeks and make it happen.
Sounds great,
Yeah.
man.
Agreed.
All right, thank you guys for hopping on here and chatting with me. This has been wonderful, and we'll chat very soon.
All right, very good. See
All
ya.
right, take
Bye
care,
now.
everybody.